Hey guys, it's Stephanie here to do a tag video. I'm going to be doing the horror booktube tag, and this was created by Alex over at Hey Little Thrifter, who I recently met. It was a lot of fun. We met up downtown and had a drink, and she is just as lovely in person as you would expect. But this is a booktube tag just about the horror side of booktube and just talking about your relationship with the genre. So the first question is, how and when did you get into horror? Looking back on it, I've always been interested in it, and I know a lot of people have said this as their answer, but I read the Goosebumps books when I was little, and I loved the scary stories to tell in the dark books, and I loved all those like ghost hunting shows and Are You Afraid of the Dark? So even before I really got into what people would call, sorry, my cat is being distracting. Even before what people would call like, straight up horror, I was always interested in it, as far as I can remember. What was the first horror book that you read? Like I said, it's hard to remember the first one. I think I remember being in like first grade, and our class took a trip to the library. And I remember I checked out the Beatrix Potter, like Tales of Peter Rabbit, and also a Goosebumps book. And I remember my mom saying like, what is this? So I would say probably then, and I was like 6 years old. So I've always been attracted to it. What horror related goodness can we expect from your channel? I feel like I read fairly widely, but I read a lot of horror, and I mention a lot of horror in my wrap-ups, and I feel like I will fight against horror snobbery. So yeah, I don't know, I mention a lot of books. I do want to bring a little more attention to indie horror, and I want to do a series on my channel where I recommend hidden gems on things like Kindle Unlimited or books that don't have a lot of reviews but are actually really great. So stuff like that. I would like to do more list type videos. The thing is, I do that kind of content on my podcast, so I might go back and do topics we've already done, but building off of that and adding more recommendations. So possibly that. Do you have any favorite themes or subgenres within horror? I love haunted house stories. I love possession stories. I love anything that really examines the nature of relationships and how tenuous they can be under different circumstances. Like, being with a group of friends stuck in the wilderness. What is that going to do to your relationship with each other? Or you and your wife move into a haunted house. What is that going to do to your relationship? These are things I'm really interested in. And also the nature of reality. Is it reality or is it in this character's head is always something that I'm very interested in. Things I would say that give me the creeps, probably dolls. Dolls have always given me the creeps. Not a fan. Name an underrated horror novel or author. For novel, one that I love, like it's a favorite of mine and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, is The Last Days of Jack Sparks. This is written by Jason Arnopp, and it's about this like douchey social media journalist who is researching the occult, and shit starts to get real. And I just love the way that this is written. I love how douchey Jack Sparks is, and I love the direction it goes. It has the feeling of what a found footage movie feels like, but reading it. And I remember I read this at work, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and was legitimately creeped out, which isn't easy to someone who reads a ton of horror. So I would say it was effective, it was interesting, and I thought about it long after I finished it, which to me is what a great book is. So I think more people should read it. So that is The Last Days of Jack Sparks. Overrated horror novel or author. I'm not really sure what to say. I think probably the obvious answer would be Stephen King, but this year I've had a lot of positive interactions with his work, so I don't know that at this moment that's how I feel, because I loved Gerald's Game and I loved Nightmares and Dreamscapes, the short story collection I read this year, so I'm not going to say, so I don't feel like saying that, because I've gotten to a point, I think it's my cat again, I've gotten to a point where I've been reading stuff and I'm thinking, I get it finally. I get the appeal. So I wouldn't say he's overrated. Like I read a John Saul book this year, and he's written a lot of stuff, in the 80s, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I own 3 other books by him, and I'm not sure if I want to read them because of how much I hated the one book I read by him. It was just so poorly written and stupid and fluffy and like a soap opera. I just did not care for it at all, in case you can't tell. So maybe him. I've only read one though, so I don't know that I can say that. Recommend 3 of your favorite horror novels. That's a tough one. I'm gonna go with the obvious answer for me is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay is probably like my favorite horror novel ever. 2, Exorcist Falls by Jonathan Janz was also like way up there, all-time favorite. 3 might be my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I thought it really balanced a poignant story, it balanced comedy, female friendship, you know, it had the right amount of like quirkiness, nostalgia, and also had legitimately scary moments. So probably that. Recommend a book for someone who is new to the horror genre. I would say this is different for every person. I would say look for something that you usually enjoy and find a mashup. So if you're into thrillers, like a horror thriller, so like maybe something by Riley Sager or Gillian Flynn. If you're into literary fiction and slow burn atmospheric stuff, I would say Shirley Jackson. So you want stuff that is a genre blender and room temperature to like dip your toes into the pool. Are there any book to film adaptations that you particularly loved or hated? I am very lenient on adaptations. I can't think of any adaptations that I've really hated. I didn't see the new Pet Sematary, but I know a lot of people did not care for that. And I'm not a stickler for things sticking to the book. There's a lot of adaptations that I love that went a completely different direction, and I love the book and the movie just the same. Like I love the Shining movie and I love the Shining book, even though they are very different. So for that question, no, I can't think of any that I've particularly hated. How do you discover new or new to you horror books? Definitely social media, Instagram and Twitter, especially since bigger publishers don't publish a ton of horror outside of like the big authors like, you know, Grady Hendrix, Paul Tremblay, Josh Malerman. I would say your best bet is following independent or like smaller publishers like Apex or Grindhouse or Word Horde, and you know, keeping up with them on social media and their release schedules and following those authors who are going to promote other authors and so on and so forth. So yeah, Instagram, following people who read a ton of horror on Bookstagram, Booktube, of course, I get a ton of great recommendations that way. And I don't know, just going through like Goodreads holes of recommendations. Like there's a lot. What was the last horror book you bought? I can't remember, which makes for an uninteresting answer to this question. What horror book is at the top of your wish list? My wish list right now is books that I have read and loved but don't own physically copies of. Either I read the book digitally or from the library, so it's a lot of my favorites that I just like don't own. Like I don't own a copy of A Head Full of Ghosts or Exorcist Falls or my best friend's Exorcism, like my top 3 favorite ones. I don't own physical copies of because I read them. I think I read all of them on my Kindle. So that I would say unread, I have The Worst Is Yet to Come by S.B. Miskowski on my wish list as a book I have been eyeing and have been like considering buying. So like that one is at the top of my wish list right now. Tag some people. It's been hard because horror booktube is very small, so I can't keep track of like who all has been tagged. So I want to say like RichardReads, Edward Lorn, JB Reviews. Like I think Alex went through and like tagged a lot of people in her original video, and as it's been going on, like anyone that reads horror, I feel like a lot of people have been tagged. So if you read horror and review horror, consider yourself tagged, because I have not been keeping up with who's been tagged in this. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you, I got this idea from Carol Marie, but if you don't have a booktube channel, you can definitely answer one of the questions down below in the comments. I would love to know like what book got you into horror, or if there's any book adaptations that you love or hate, you know, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.